Oh, we're back. Hello. Oh, no, you want to have a look at nice boards and nice painted miniatures, not our faces. So if we can move on to the next category, please. This is the best of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So Age of Sigmar, we all know what it is. We love Age of Sigmar. It's got some really good things this year, though, hasn't it?
Wow. So yeah,
Oh.
I mean,
Oh, oui. Yes, Lord. We God.
Apologies for the ad break, guys. Oops, oh, come on, let it stay on the screen for a minute. Come on. Don't be like this, guys.
Uftak Black Hawk brought to life there in plastic. Some of you might remember Uftak from Mike Brooks's book Brutal Cunning. Look how cool
Haven't read
it
it,
is. Eddie,
unfortunately.
give us a little lowdown on Uftak.
So, Uftak is a Bad Moon Orc. He is rising through the ranks of his particular warband on his way from being a knob, where we saw him in the last novel, to being full war boss as he's kind of now manifesting.
Nice.
He is a Bad Moon, which means that he is kitted out with the flashiest war gear he can find. So you can have a look
Cool
at that
stuff.
model and see that he's got some fairly brutal looking war gear. He's got that enormous kind of seismic hammer there that's going to hit like a power fist. And then his combi weapon is a particularly brutal example of kind of orky tech there. And I think my favorite feature of this model, I'm sure many people's favorite, is that it's balanced there on the back of a, I guess, a targeting squig.
Yeah.
You see a squig there with his little bionic eye.
It's perfect.
Yeah, he looks a little bit like the
So orky.
squig hogs, but much smaller. So maybe it's like a pet squig hog.
Oh, okay,
to
nice.
carry
Pet
his-
footrest.
Yeah, sort of part pet, part footrest, part kind of gun rest. But a very cool model. I'm sure we'll see plenty of these as well popping up as orc war bosses in Warhammer 40,000 Armies too.
Well, with all
Looks
this talk
ferocious.
of Uftak, I reckon it's time for the next reveal.
Hi, I'm Black Library author Mike Brooks, and I'm here to reveal my new orc novel, The Big Dagger.
Mike is one of the coolest authors working for Library. I'm not sure which of his stuff I've read,
A new novel would be,
but it's
but
from
in
a
more
few
general
years ago, for
terms,
sure.
it's about
I'm
Uftak Black
pretty sure I
Hawk,
liked it.
who was the star of Brutal Cunning, finds himself engaged in hostilities with the Drukhari as he tries to prove himself as big boss of the Tekwa. He's trying to make sure that the boys under his command are getting fights and they're getting loot and they're getting everything that they want, but he's also starting to get a bit of ambition of his own to maybe rise a bit further.
It's always good.
And he takes his slightly unconventional approach
It's motivation.
to trying to find a way to make that happen and have a good fight along the way.
The
What
need
makes
for
Orcs
speed.
appeal most to me is the fact that I've always played them. I've been playing Games Workshop for over 30 years now, and I've always played orcs. And Uftak has been my go-to orc character. If I've needed a war boss or I've needed a Blood Bowl captain or anything, it's always been Uftak Black Orc. I just really enjoy using them. One of the reasons why I enjoy writing orcs is because it just comes so easily. I think because I've played them for so long and I've read so many background books, I used to read the second edition Orc Codex back to front when I was a kid. It's just quite sort of all natural up in here. Orc behaviour comes quite naturally to me on the page. I would like to specify. I don't go around ramming people on the roads. It was very interesting to try and get into
That'd be
the
problematic.
heads of two different Xenos species. And it was very interesting to have no human perspectives really in this novel at all, but also trying to bring about the contrast between the two species and the Orcs' very direct approach, as opposed to the Drukhari's very sneaky approach. It's absolutely fantastic to see the new miniature and to actually have a canon playable off-tack on the tabletop after I've been using my own versions for so many years. It's sort of the thing that you almost dream about if you're becoming a Black Library author, is that one of your creations might make it to be a model. So it's absolutely fantastic to see.
So obviously he's not alone in this. Graham McNeil has had real interests.
The big
Rachel Harrison has had
Mike Brooks there.
Commissar Sabrina.
Full-length Uff-Tack Black Hawk novel. I thought it was really interesting to hear Mike talk about getting into the Orc mindset as well as getting into the Drukhari mindset.
Apologies for that, guys.
What do we know about
Rachel Harrison has had Commissar Sabrina Rain.
Yes.
Dan Abbott has the 10th First and Only. And there's so much more, you know, that's out there. So it's really good that they're bringing more models from the books onto the tabletop. Whether or not I like a model, I think it's a great approach because it draws two different parts of the fandom together, and it's good for both. It's a huge positive for both.
Underhanded and fast. And the story itself, a big chunk of it, is set in the Dark City itself, in Camorra. And we've seen Camorra a little bit in some stories before, but we've never seen it through the perspective of an orc, which is a very unusual sort of perspective, right? So you've got this kind of ancient, arcane, alien city, the gladiatorial pits and all the kind of Machiavellian politics of the Drukhari. And then you've got the orcs, who are basically just the brutal, barbarian monsters who are kind of unleashed into it. And I think it's going to be an interesting ride.
Yeah. And you can see that as well, like in the miniature and the design behind sort of Uff-Tack as like a miniature. He looks sort of like super brutal and super like hench and kind of, you know, like bashing stuff up,
It's
wrecking
just
stuff,
orc, right? So like, I mean, every orc warbus is kind of heads that direction, right?
Yeah.
They all turn into these huge, great green monsters. And there's that kind of interesting difference between, well, the bigger and more powerful an orc gets, the kind of literally the bigger and meaner and more powerful and brutal, and they just turn into these huge hulking monsters.
Yeah.
And then the Drukhari are almost, they just don't have any of that, right? The more powerful you are as a Drukhari warlord, probably the less you fight, right? You kind of sit happily in your ivory tower or ride around on your raider somewhere, kind of directing the battle from afar. But they're both really interesting factions, and I think we haven't really seen the Drukhari and the orcs in fiction kind of bumping into each other head to head. Obviously battles like that happen all the time on the battlefield of Warhammer 40,000, but like what is the story behind that has never really been explored, so it should be an interesting read.
Yeah, and you can really see Mike's passion shining through in that
He definitely likes his orcs,
well.
doesn't
He loves his orcs. Yeah.
I mean, what's not to love, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What's not to love?
So speaking about the second novel from Mike, we have got an extra special reveal. This is the special edition.
Oh, wow.
I'll pop this here. The special edition of Brutal Cunning, which is another Mike Brooks novel. So, Eddie, I mean, this looks absolutely awesome. Like, the sleeve looks amazing. Is that embossed? It's a bit of both, I think.
Yeah, so this is Brutal Cunning. This is the sequel book to the Big Dacker.
Yeah.
So if you didn't manage to get your hands on the physical copy of Brutal Cunning the first time round, obviously you can get it on ebook and audiobook right now, but some people just
Very stylized.
book, right?
Yeah.
So
looks
this is a
neat.
special edition of Brutal Cunning that's on its way at the same time as the Big Dacker. For those of you who didn't read Brutal Cunning the first time, it is Uff-Tack Blackhawk versus Captain Badrook, who is another one of your kind of big orc characters, a named character with a miniature. Right. It's basically a tale of orc piracy.
Okay,
so
cool.
it's good. So almost like two rival orc pirate captains trying to grab the loot from a forge world as it's kind of overthrown by an orc war. It's good fun.
Amazing. Excited. Might have to pick that up. Yeah. Time for another reveal?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Hi, I'm Black Library author Jude Reed, and I'm here to reveal my new novel, Morvenval, Spear of Faith.
Oh yes, let's go. Throw it at us. Or the Emperor.
My new book, Morvenval, Spear of Faith, follows Morven Val, who's High Lord of Terra and Abbess Sanctorum of the Adeptus Sororitas at the point that we meet her. She's a political appointee to the job, and she doesn't have a great deal of faith in herself when we start the novel, but all of that comes to a head when Ophelia 7, which is the planet of the Adeptus Sororitas, comes under attack, and that's a shadowy figure called the Death of Saints, who's come to attack the planet. So Morven's placed in a position where she's caught between her political obligations and her duty to her sisters. And the book's about the choices that she makes in defence of that world and the sacrifices she has to make to hold it. Writing about a High Lord of Terra is obviously a huge obligation because they're such a big part of the setting and they come with so much baggage attached to them. We haven't seen Morven very much. She's appeared in a few codexes, and obviously this is her first appearance in a Warhammer novel. It was a balance of trying to meet those expectations about what's already been established about the character and allowing her to really grow and develop as a real person on the page. She's an interesting character because at no point where she's appeared has she been the focus of any miracles, and she's been appointed by the High Lords of Terra as someone who they think will be inexperienced, someone who they think will be malleable, and we know very rapidly that that's not the case. She's somebody who takes on the mantle, she makes it her own. And for inspiration,
So I'm not sure where I had my mic off there, but yeah, excellent cover. The miniature is fantastic, and the book sounds like it's going to be really amazing. I'm definitely going to be reading that when it comes out.
So
For
it was
sure.
nice to have the chance to really develop the character, to try and work out why she is the way that she is. This sort of shining beacon of faith, leading an army of warrior saints who's not in herself a focus of miracles. It was a big difference in writing about Ursula Creed and also writing about Morven Val. They are both very powerful women. They're both leaders of huge armies. They're both very accomplished warriors in their own rights, but their background is very different and their motivations are very different. Ursula, like all Cadians, is very much shaped by the loss of Cadia and all those dramatic events. Morven has grown up as one of the Adeptus Sororitas. She's never known another life. So all of her life is hinged around faith and her relationship with the God Emperor and her relationship with her other sisters. And while Ursula was someone who knew what she wanted to achieve, who'd set out with every professional decision she'd ever made to become the head of the Cadian armies, Morven's someone who's really been thrust into this position, someone who never expected to be the anointed leader of the Adeptus Sororitas, but she's someone that's kind of got to make good and just doing her best for the God Emperor and for her sisters and for the Imperium as best she can. Doubt is one of the big themes of Morven Val, Spear of Faith, but it's not doubt in the God Emperor. Her faith is never tried. Her doubt hinges around whether she's worthy of this tremendous honour that she's been given, whether she has the skills, and whether that appointment was made for the right reasons, because she's fairly cynical about the reasons why she's in the job. But now she's there, she's going to make the best of it. Without giving away too many spoilers,
This all sounds fantastic, man.
The antagonists, the Night Lords,
He
in
keeps
Morven
selling
Val's
me
Spear
on
of
this.
Faith, or something that I had a lot of fun with. And the main antagonist is a character called Col Racul, the Death of Saints, and he's almost a legendary figure who's come out of the history of the Argent Shroud, sworn to kill them all, to burn their temples, to destroy every trace of the Argent Shroud. And the conflict, the central conflict of the book, is between Morven and the Death of Saints. And I think the bit I enjoyed most writing about the book, although I enjoyed it all, is drilling into why exactly he is the way he is and why he's
That's
not
good.
a mindless killer. And there are elements where I even had a bit of sympathy for him. Writing about the Night Lords and an army that uses terror as their prime weapon was absolutely wonderful. The thing that drew me to them in the first place, partly, obviously, the books about the Night Lords by Aaron Dembski-Bowden, which I've been a massive fan of for years, but the visual contrast between the gleaming silver armour of the Argent Shroud and the dark blue armour of the Night Lords was just so visually appealing in the first instance. And on the one hand, superficially,
Ain't
it
wrong.
couldn't be more different. These shining beacons of imperial faith and these corrupted heretic Astartes who are sowing terror and discord almost just for the sake of it. But when you drill down into it, there's a lot of horrific things that the Adeptus Sororitas do, and I absolutely loved drawing the comparison
doubt.
between
They're
the
fanatics.
actions that they both take.
More than the
And
usual
obviously they're
for
very,
the
very different
Imperium.
goals, but for the ordinary people of the Imperium, both are very much figures of terror. It's just slightly different in how they approach things. It certainly starts with some political intrigue, but there's plenty of action that starts coming and just keeps coming for the rest of it.
Faith meets fear. That's a good tagline.
Morven Val, Spear of Faith, revealed by Jude Reed there. Now, this is a standalone novel. This is about a character that's already been a very, very popular miniature. What do we know about this book, Eddie?
So Morven Val is one of the High Lords of Terror, which is basically about as important as you can ever be as a human within the Imperium. She is the leader of the Adeptus Sororitas, and effectively a very, very important character in Warhammer 40,000. But up until this point, we haven't actually heard all that much about her. She's kind of popped up in Warhammer 40,000 Crusade books and in some of the kind of hinted at in some of the narrative, but we've never kind of got inside her head in a way, or kind of seen her motivations and things like that. So Jude's book here, Spear of Faith, lets us do that. Basically, we get to see like what makes this really important character in Warhammer 40,000 tick, and she's put her up against the Night Lords, who are basically like the most villainous villains that you've got in Warhammer 40,000, which is saying something, right? Because we've got some pretty good villains.
Yeah.
The Night Lords are like the worst of the worst Chaos Space Marines. They are like murderers and butchers and killers, and they're going up against the forces of the Adeptus Sororitas, who kind of manifest divine warriors of the Emperor. So you've got this very interesting dichotomy of like the light and the darkness, the kind of the saintly and the demonic sort of thing clashing.
Cool. Very nice. It was really interesting to hear Jude talking about taking some inspiration from like famous religious women in history as well, which I thought was super, super interesting.
I mean, all of Warhammer 40,000 is kind of pulls its influences from lots of historical sources, as well as being kind of referential of Warhammer's very deep history as well. But there is definitely a very strong sort of medieval sort of feel, particularly to the Adeptus Sororitas. They have that sort of knightly, saintly sort of vibe to them. That's kind of their jam, right?
Yeah, and also I know that Jude has written another sort of really iconic female character as well, Ursula Creed, and she talked a little bit about the differences between those two characters. And
yeah, and I think it's important that it doesn't just become every character in Warhammer 40,000 has the same motivations, right? Because even though this is like a grim, dark future where everybody is effectively pushed into battle in some way, shape, or form, the way that manifests is really different, and it's cool to be able to start exploring actually what is it that drives these really important characters to kind of take up the mantle and kind of go into battle, and how do they approach it differently.
From the 41st millennium to the 31st millennium now, this is the Art of Horus Heresy art book. This thing is packed with over 200 pages of amazing artwork. Eddie, tell us a little bit about the art book.
Yeah, so this is effectively a collection of all of the covers of the novels of the Horus Heresy series, which there are like over 60 books now, so there's loads and loads of stuff in there. Most of them have been done by artist Neil Roberts, who's kind of been doing
well over 60 books,
the very first kind of Horus Rising and kind of onwards.
Neil Roberts is
just like
iconic.
A really lovely visual
for all of his Horus Heresy covers.
Horus Heresy. So
there's so many good ones, like First Heretic,
all the way back to the kind of the start of the Horus Heresy, where you've got like kind of the Lunar Wolves basically,
and
all the way through to the battles right at the end, where you've got the Emperor.
Yep, that's one that's done by Neil as well.
Final
it references in
room,
older,
all the artwork of the Siege of Terror series,
and older artwork.
And some little kind of nods
and
I
think there's a bit too much negative space
the team behind those and
at the bottom of that.
Well. So if you
it looks so amazing,
fan of the
man.
Horus Heresy, you want like a really lovely coffee table book to kind of look through at your leisure. It's a really nice way of doing it. Also, if you're a hobbyist and you want to kind of have a really lovely close-up look at some of the things for inspiration, you want to kind of recreate some of those scenes. Obviously, Forge World do some really nice character versions of some of these models as well, so they can give you that kind of really detailed inspiration if you wanted to have a go at that. But it's just a lovely book to own if you're a Horus Heresy collector, really.
And we've also got the very nice, just down here, the very nice Siege of Terror bookmark as well.
Absolutely. If somehow the Siege of Terror isn't gripping enough so that you can read it in a single sitting,
you need.
And Dan has done his work actually in terms of making sure that those are pretty big books. That you might actually have to stop halfway through for lunch break or something.
Sure.
We have a Siege of Terror bookmark which allows you to kind of save your place, and it's just a lovely little kind of Imperial throne there. I think that's the Emperor's throne himself on a little golden pyramid. Somewhere underneath the Himalayas.
Very nice. Time for another reveal?
Let's do it.
Hi, I'm Guy Haley, and I'm here to introduce my new Trekkie Flint novel, The Ghosts of Barak Minos. The plot of The Ghost of Barak Minos sees Trekkie Flint. He's down on his luck in Barak Morna.
I just wanted Drakenfels. I was like,
gone back to the ancestral homeland.
I'm excited, but
work
is he talking about Drakenfels?
Impoverished following his adventures in the previous book. The reason he's so poor is that although Trekkie Flint is a little bit of a ne'er-do-well, or likes to think he is, he's, as he often says, he's a rogue, not a villain. So
I've not read much of Age of Sigmar.
Very, very down on his luck.
Nothing substantive beyond the first release.
who was one of his crew in the previous book and who went missing when he fell into the giant realm gate at the heart of the Shoals of Acromia and vanished. But he discovers that he's come
Really
back
sure about that, guys.
and may have some information about the
I'm really
lost
back off.
Skyport
yeah.
of Barak Minors.
So I've not really read
Barak
much of
Minors is
Age
one
of
of
Sigmar beyond the
two
first
Caradron Skyports
they were
in the
releases. So I've read
Threshold,
Realm
which is
Gate
an area
Wars,
of,
a couple other novels
supposed to be like a piratical
that are set in like 2.0, just before Soul Wars and stuff. But Guy Haley is like,
something mysterious and terrible happened to
I don't think I've ever read anything from him, even his original work. That was like, I don't like that.
There have been rumors going around.
It's all been really good stuff, especially his original work.
And races that Barak Minors
Champion of Mars
destroyed and might still be out there with a huge treasure trove of harvest ether gold. And as soon as Drecky Flint finds out about this, he's on the case because he's got no money. He mentions at the beginning of the book that they've been reduced to flying packets in an old sort of sense. He's delivering messages, basically. He's become a mailman, a glorified mailman in Ulgu. And he's a bit looked down upon as a provincial because he's not from the main Skyport. He's from an outpost of Barak Mornar. And he's very, very depressed to find out that nobody knows who he is. So wherever he goes in the Sky Shoals, everybody knows who Drecky Flint is. But in Barak Mornar, it's Drecky who? So he's not particularly happy about that. Drecky was part of an interesting collaboration between Black Library and the Age of Sigmar studio, where we're asked to come up with a character based on an archetype. So it was a really, really interesting process. And Drecky's a little bit different to writing somebody, say, like one of the Primarchs, because he doesn't have a lot of baggage. It's a bit more of a free-floating, free-booting, fancy, footloose and fancy-free kind of character. When I came to write Drecky for the new novel, I wanted to continue on the story that I'd created for him in the beginning. I very much had an idea for Drecky, which would be a 3-part story, delving into a particular aspect of his life. We meet him after he's split up with his wife, and where he's still at odds with his estranged father-in-law, and where his own father has gone missing. And all of these things tie into those sort of overarching plot lines. So I have complete freedom with those elements of the story to create his journey as a character, and that that's very, very liberating to be in that position. It was really exciting to see Drecky turned into a miniature, because then you get into that aspect again of different interpretations of the same idea. When I saw him, he had a slightly different weapon. I was going, oh, that's really cool. He's got a harpoon on the end of it. And at that point, I hadn't finished writing the first book, so I wrote that harpoon into the story. That's one of the things I love about working with Games Workshop, is that the environments are so rich and there's so many brilliant creative people involved with all the settings that you become part of a collective whole. And it's really one of the greatest sort of settings, I think, in the world that I've loved for many, many years. And to be sort of caught up in that and to see your ideas turned into living plastic, as it were, it's just the best. It's absolutely amazing feeling.
The Ghosts of Barak Minors, revealed by Guy Haley there. This is the second full-length novel from the adventures of Drecky Flint. The previous novel was Archonauts Oath. Eddie, what do we know about The Ghosts of Barak Minors?
So, as you say, this is a Drecky Flint novel from Guy Haley. Guy Haley has been writing novels for a very long time and has some great work under his belt, and is particularly familiar with kind of Duardin and their kind of dwarven ancestor archetypes. Yeah. So the Caradrons are a sky-faring people who are effectively sort of like piratical and out to get treasure across the realms. And Drecky Flint is a particularly notable example of that breed. He has a miniature, of course, so you can pick the miniature up. Or it came out, I think, last year or year before. So you can already find that model and add it to your Caradron collection. And this continues his kind of story of adventure into the realms. And he's notable mostly because he gets into some interesting scrapes, basically. So he has a nose for treasure, but maybe not a particularly good eye for when danger might be rearing its head.
Always a good character to be writing for as well, and it was great to hear Guy talk about like the freedom of being able to write such a sort of like footloose and fancy free character, like he talks about.
Yeah, I think Caradrons again are one of those factions where they've got a very clear visual identity, right? So you look at them and you go, you can understand kind of how they work and where they come from, and their origin story is quite compelling. But actually, we haven't spent a huge amount of time with any of the individual characters. So Dreckie Flint allows us that kind of lens to kind of explore this faction, but they're also a really good lens to go, actually, let's just explore the mortal realms generally, because they are naturally kind of pioneers and ambitious and adventurous, and they do kind of sail these skyships off into kind of unknown territories. So they're a really good mechanism to both create a really good story, but also just to kind of explore this really cool, compelling world that the Mortal Realms is.
So let's take a look at some 40k novels now. Eddie, what do we got here?
So we've got 2 Warhammer 40,000 novels on their way.
Came back just in time.
Lazarus, about the Dark
Wow.
Angels, the very loyal Dark Angels, and the very not loyal Emperor's Children have a novel on their way too. So Lazarus, Enmity's Edge, is a story about the captain of the 5th Company. We are familiar with this character already. He has a miniature for Warhammer 40,000, which you can...
The Lazarus is a lieutenant miniature
And
that
this
came
story
out
sees
at the start
him,
of 8th edition.
Trying to
When the Dark
bring
Angels
the
Codex
Imperial
came out, I
world
guess.
into the fold in the wake
I have the
of
model.
Rift.
I built him
Basically
as
comes
a
across
jump
Imperial Night World, which is
captain or
a very
something.
powerful world, kind of definitely
Not sure what,
back in the Imperial
but
fold.
it's a very
Goes
nice
quite
miniature,
smoothly, as you'd expect.
and it's really great to
The
see
enemy
him getting
kind of dragged
a
this
novel
world down
finally.
into,
You know,
into
they did this
chaos
with
quickly.
the Ultramarines. They did this with
And
the
what's
Blood
next?
Angels,
Renegades,
and yeah, Dark Angels
Lord
as well.
XS.
Yep,
So
this
maybe
is
we
an
get something with the
Emperor's
Blood Angels
Children
guy.
novel
You know,
about a
you can
character
certainly
called
expect
Xanthine.
that.
Xanthine is a lord of the Emperor's Children, and he's basically getting a bit tired and bored of raiding lesser Imperial worlds, and he's looking for a bigger prize. And he stumbles across
Lord of
upon this
Exodus.
planet, which is the center of Imperial rejuvenant treatment, which is the stuff that keeps Imperial nobles alive for kind of long periods of time. And what he sees in this world is a world that's kind of under the yoke of Imperial oppression, but he wants to kind of...
These are gonna be
claim for
great
himself
books.
and
I don't
become
know
lord of
who the
new
authors are.
mini empire for himself.
But
All of the Emperor's Children lords kind of see
excited.
themselves as
Thumbs
future
up, guys.
nobles that only if everything could just go right, they would be able to be the lord of their own small empires within the galaxy.
Cool. Some absolutely awesome books from 40k there. Reckon it's time for another reveal.
Let's do it.
Coming back to him is great because you go, well, how
John
far
French,
will he
let's
this
go.
time? Where will hope lead him to? What terrible things will it make him do? And how will he somehow rationalize what he is doing? Ahriman Undying is a follow-up to Ahriman Eternal, and it starts where you might not expect it to, with Ahriman having actually lost his warband, all of his followers, from them having been taken over by this presence
Wow.
called the Pyrodime.
What an artwork,
him
man.
having
Damn.
apparently also lost in this battle against a Necron Pharaon. Really, it's a mystery story in some ways about how on earth this happened and then what he can do to unravel that and hopefully save his legion from this new doom that is trying to destroy them from within and trying to defeat this incredibly intelligent ancient Necron called Setek. Ahriman's plan to save his legion at this point is something that he has to figure out. He doesn't actually know how he's going to do it at this point. But one of the things that he was searching for is this device that allows you to manipulate time. The Necrons have chronometron technology that allows them to, on a limited basis, rewind time. And he is searching for a larger one of these devices. He apparently has failed at the beginning of this book. But as becomes clear throughout the book, whenever anything that involves the manipulation of time is concerned, what appears to be happening might not actually be what is happening. And in that lies the answer to how he might be able to get out of this problem. This book was incredibly fun to write. I love writing things that have mind-bending, time-switching...
Stuff like this is really
this book is, to be honest,
nice to read about.
You have intersecting
It's
timelines,
even more fulfilling to
different visions of
watch,
past
and
future.
it's a device
It
that a
includes
lot of
the
TV shows
Harlequins
use,
who are
right?
operating,
But
according to their own prediction.
seeing it with a 40K
and
novel,
manipulation of the future.
I'm not sure if
based on their
we've seen
great
this before
cycles. So you get
in this
them,
way,
and you
quite
get
this
to
way
see
before.
how they perceive things.
But
you have the
man,
Necrons
this has got me
who are also
excited.
perceiving
I've not read
exactly
the
same
Armin
set of
trilogy yet.
circumstances
I
from their
know I
point of
tried to
view,
read
how they
to get a
waged
start on it a
war
few years back,
basically across time.
but for some reason
And
I
then
just
you have
like
the Thousand Sons
didn't.
and Ahriman who are also trying to do all of these
Might have
things
changed that.
from the point of view of incredibly powerful sorcerers whose minds also are almost existing within the warp as much as they are their bodies. It's mind-bending stuff But ultimately, really, it's a story about power, the limits of power, and hubris. You've got these two characters, Setek and Ahriman, who one of them is a Necron Pharaon who believes that he alone has the power to change the past and should have the right to dominate the future. You have Ahriman, this incredibly powerful Thousand Sun sorcerer, who believes that only he sees clearly and only he can create a future for his legion. So there's no similarities there at all between the two of them. And really, all of the time shenanigans aside, it's really about how those two
You really can't be a
incredible
40k name
intelligences
character without a lot of
and
hubris.
incredibly
Especially for
arrogant
chaos.
individuals
That
clash,
fits
and which
right
one
there.
comes out on top.
And a
I think the
Necron
best thing about
character
Ahriman
being
is that he keeps on lying to himself.
having a
That's
huge
the most
ego.
intriguing thing about him. He keeps on telling this lie
It's like the
that
check
he
mark.
can make it
It
right.
has to be there.
That there is hope for him, for the Thousand Sons, that there is this way back from all of the misfortunes that have been piled on them. And that's what makes him intriguing, because that hope never runs out. So it leads him down these increasingly desperate attempts to undo the past, to make the future right. And because he is Ahriman, some of those are incredibly extreme. His first attempt was the rubric. The second attempt was to recast the rubric. This attempt is to rewrite time. They're not small things. So coming back to him is great, because you go, well, how far will he go this time? Where will hope lead him to? What terrible things will it make him do? And how will he somehow rationalize what he is doing to himself, apart from also the rest of his legion?
Ahriman Undying revealed by John French there. Undying is the fifth installment of the Ahriman series, all written by John, and by the sounds of things, some absolutely mind-bending sort of time lines, just past, present, and future there. So, Eddie, what do we know about Ahriman Undying?
Yeah, some proper shenanigans going on in this book.
Absolutely.
So Ahriman, obviously one of the kind of most pivotal characters in Warhammer 40,000, certainly one of the most pivotal in the kind of Chaos pantheon. He is the architect of many of the kind of woes and hopes of the Thousand Sons, everything from kind of trying to save them from turning into kind of horrendous spawn, to kind of damning them in various different ways, teaming up with his kind of Primarch father to save them and or damn them in various different shapes. So a really interesting, compelling character. We've seen him kind of face off against all sorts of stuff through the Warhammer 40,000 universe. And in this one, he's up against the Necrons, which obviously have their own kind of mastery of the physical realm and time and space. So you have this interesting kind of playoff between Ahriman is the kind of the herald and the architect of Tzeentch and master of manipulation and warpcraft and things like that. But the Necrons have got utter mastery of the physical space. So you've got the warp and reality kind of smashing into each other in this kind of interesting playoff. Ahriman is a lot like the Necron characters in a lot of ways. He is this kind of intelligent Machiavellian schemer leading legions of undying warriors, which is pretty much the kind of how the Necrons work, right? They've got these intelligent pharaohs leading their legions. So there's this interesting kind of play there between the two. John's done loads of great fiction for Black Library. He's got a really good kind of grip on doing those kind of dark, evil characters and giving them a bit more of a kind of compelling angle, including my boy Cypher. Did the novel for him as well, obviously, so I brought my t-shirt along to kind of rep him as well. But yeah, looking forward to seeing Ahriman back in action, basically. He's always fun to see him in battle.
Lovely. So, speaking of Necrons, what we have here is the Infinite and the Divine Special Edition by Robert Rath. Now, this is a special edition of an extremely popular story. Eddie, what do we know about this novel?
This book came out a few years ago and has been an absolutely huge hit with Warhammer 40,000 fans, particularly fans of the Necrons. And what you basically have is a several millennia long rivalry between two of the biggest characters in the kind of Necron lore. So you have Trazyn the Infinite, who is renowned for kind of collecting
this is not what I really want to read
around
about,
the Warhammer 40,000
because
universe,
so many people have expressed
or entire battlefield and keeping them in this kind of weird labyrinth
early
museum somewhere.
Cool.
Necron
this pairing is of Trazyn and Orican.
Orican the Diviner, who is
a
chronomancer.
It's the kind of stuff that really gets me
hyped
hyped
and read the
to read a
stars
book.
and see the future coming.
And you know,
and effectively
there's
these
so
two
much
are
I want to
loggerheads.
know
They're trying
about
to kind of one-up each other
with
and
these
steal each
all these
other's
characters, especially
relics
since
and power,
Oregon
and
has
kind
gotten a
of try
model.
to trick each other basically over the course of several millennia.
dropping
And
into
it's
a
all
lot of
based around
different
this one
plot
planet
threads
which
across the
kind of
40K.
sees the Necrons
So it's
kill up
like, you know,
against almost
this is
everything
gonna be a
that
good
Warhammer
book to read.
40,000 has to throw at them. So you've got humans and Eldar and orcs and native life forms and all sorts of stuff over the course of millennia, and it all kind of comes to a head right at the end as these two kind of square off against each other. It's really fun.
And it looks fantastic as well. That sort of like inlay on there on the paper. I don't know if you can see that, but that is like super cool bit of
It's a
artwork
really
in there.
lovely book as well. Like if you've got a Necron army on your shelf, it would look very nice alongside it, or on a bookshelf. You can put it on any shelf, really. It would
Any
look
kind
good
of
on any
shelf.
shelf. Yeah.
Okay, so shall we move on to another reveal?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm Mark Collins, Black Library author. I'm here to reveal my next novel, which is the Horus Heresy character novel, Eidolon the Auric Hammer.
This is great. Mark Collins is a buddy of mine.
Is Lord Commander of the Emperor's Children. He currently stands as the Lord Commander Primus. He commands a third of the Legion by the point of this novel, and has slowly built his way back up. He fell out of favour with Fulgrim and was actually killed and brought back by his Primarch, and in the aftermath of that he sought to consolidate his hold on the Legion and to define himself among a growing coterie of monsters. So in the Auric Hammer we find Eidolon. He is leading the third millennial of the Emperor's Children, and they are headed to Terra in the wake of Fulgrim and after the Bleak Council on Ulanor. After that, he finds himself becalmed in the warp, haunted by the ghosts of his past and the demons that are assailing him. And he finds himself drawn into the orbit of a world where he actually rose to become Lord Commander. And it's there that he has to face down the choices that are going to define him going forward and leading to Terra. Eidolon is torn between two different worlds. He's died and he's been brought back. He is the soul severed, and that sort of weighs heavily on him throughout the novel. He struggles with his legacy and with his past. He struggles with the decisions that he's made, and ultimately it's about the choices that he's made and the choices that he will continue to make. He's a character with a lot of history, and it's going all the way back to Horus Rising. When we first meet him, he's very arrogant. He's sort of put in his place by Turgaden. So going right back to his roots and then working through the Heresy, I had a pile of books. I had the Forge World Black books. I had numerous Heresy novels, Clone Lord by Josh Reynolds. And I just sort of took all these novels and looked at the moments that Eidolon appears
there, Mark.
and what his defining character traits are. And they are ultimately his arrogance, his ambition, the drive to always, in his own way, embody perfection and to chase after that.
Yep.
And with what's happened to him, it's a harder struggle because he considers himself to be flawed, ruined, and it's sort of fighting against that perception of himself. Writing Eidolon, especially in the Horus Heresy, was definitely a challenge, but it was one that I enjoyed and one that I rose to. I feel that with a character like Eidolon, there's so much that's already been written about him, so it's always finding the cracks, finding the places where there's narrative gaps, and for me that was between his appearance at Fulgrim's side in Slaves to Darkness and then on to when he fights Dorn in Saturnine. I felt as though there was a rich seam to be mined there. It's a journey literally and figuratively, and so it was interesting to carry him forward and to see him finding his motivation, finding his power, and what sets them up for the final confrontation, essentially. Finding that narrative journey, that sort of thread that we can carry through and miring it in something that's full of drama, that was definitely one of the more interesting parts of writing this novel. We eventually conceived of Eidolon confronting an element from his past. In this case, we chose a battleground where he'd been lauded by Fulgrim and raised up to Lord Commander. So to do that, it involved sort of crafting a microcosm of the larger story, taking an organic piece of setting and then bringing in other characters. There's a number of characters in this novel that almost mirror the aspects of Eidolon's personality. We have one that is still the warrior.
Mark keeps selling me on this novel,
we have another one who's
and
falling into
he had me at Eidolon.
And then you have
all I'm gonna say.
the Cacophony. And I feel as though those characters in that setting, they work together to sort of inform Eidolon's own journey and to serve as foils for his motivations. The central conflict, I would say, isn't what you expect, and he sort of faces down someone that perhaps wouldn't have been they wouldn't expect to be there. And I feel as though the contrast between the two different forces really helps to, again, drive home how far he can rise and also how far he's fallen.
Eidolon, the Auric Hammer by Mark Collins there. Mark revealing that book there. Eddie,
Well, these guys walk on.
So Eidolon is a character that we first met in the very, very first Horus Heresy book, Horus Rising, and right from the start, he was kind of one of those characters you love to hate.
So Mark is an old friend of mine from almost like 12 years ago, 13 years ago. We were in this one forum called the Bolt Hole, which was kind of like a melting pot of a bunch of aspiring writers and fans of the setting. And, you know, there are so many people who have come up through that. There's Sarah Cockwell, there's Mark, there's Jonathan Deere, there's Robbie McNiven, there's a bunch of other people. There's Rachel Harrison. And I just love how all of them have come up through the ranks from that forum, because especially Sarah, because she was like the big mother hen of the forum group and everything. And you know, I've done some reading for Mark back in the day. I think I've done for a few people. I think I might have done some for Mark. Not sure. But it's amazing seeing that Mark has been able to get published in the last few years, and he's having such a great success that he's working on Horus Heresy. You know, it's absolutely amazing. What he's talking about with Eidolon is, I think, all fantastic stuff. Eidolon is one of those characters, you know, who you absolutely hate on the first meeting. Like when we meet him in Horus Rising, he's an absolute dick. You know, and he's absolutely smashed, like figuratively, by those Sons of Horus, the Lunavils as they're known at the time, and then also again with Horus, and I think it's great.
Eddie, what do we know about the Hollow King?
So The Hollow King is a novel about a Soulblight Gravelord's vampire. It's come out before, a very popular book. It did sell out quite quickly, so it's now getting this new special edition, which is a really beautiful book. You can see it's kind of got lovely gold trim, and it's even got little bats down the side there. It's pretty cool.
Guys, tell me who the author is.
So the
or
Hollow
show it on the
King
cover.
is an interesting character.
Prominently.
He is a Soulblight Gravelord, which means he is a vampire. He feasts on the blood of mortals, but he tries to do it in a slightly more responsible way, I suppose. He is a character that's on a quest for vengeance, basically. So his bloodline, his family was wiped out by
having just the book name there doesn't do a whole lot. Having the author's name there is also important, I think. I think in the image they showed, the author's name is shown on the bottom of that cover. Not sure, but at least, you know, talk more about the author, guys. Come on, not just the book or the characters in it. Talk about the author. Not everyone knows all the stuff.
Another reveal?
Let's do it.
You know what I mean?
Hello, I'm John French, and I'm here to introduce my new book, The Dead Kingdom.
Okay, more John French stuff. What is this?
The Dead Kingdom is about Cato Ezekar having been given a task by Neferata to go and solve a problem in the kingdom of Calyx. In the kingdom of Calyx, the followers of Neferata are in conflict with the followers of Manfred von Carstein for who dominates this kingdom and the blood-feeding rites inside it. The real problem also is that Cato has been told that he is not allowed to start a war. But every likelihood is that there is only one way out of this, and that is war. So somehow he has to honour his obligation to his queen, not start a war, and stop the followers of Manfred von Carstein taking the kingdom of Calyx. How on earth is he going to get out of this?
I'm sure he'll figure it out.
There's absolutely no way that war isn't going to come out of this. The question really is what shape that's going to be. Cato is a Soulblight vampire. He was a king back in the Age of Myth who lost his kingdom as Chaos rose up and took it from him and turned it to ashes. And ever since then, he has been on this quest, initially for vengeance against the forces of Chaos, and then later to hunt down the person responsible for his kingdom burning. He is a conflicted character, because on one side he is a vampire, he is brutal, monstrous, but on the other side he has a code that he lives by. He believes in nobility and that there is the possibility of redemption for him and for those that
I can
follow.
get behind that.
It's
I like
an almost
that.
impossible mission for him to square those two things, because he's also forced back into the company of other soul-blight vampires. He's actually viewed as something of a figure of fear inside the other soul-blight vampires.
Okay.
So he
we
has
could
that
get-
reputation following him as well. How he doesn't get sucked back into that version of himself is incredibly challenging. And all the other characters in it do their best to pull him back in to that old way. One of the most enjoyable things about writing about Kado is slowly unpeeling his backstory and where he came from, why he is, what he did in the past. You meet him in The Hollow King, you learn what he's like and what he's doing now. This book shows more about the path that he walked.
Oh, The Hollow
between
King, the
death of
special
his
edition
kingdom
that showed off. Okay.
and
That was
where
John
he
French.
is now.
All right.
So that's
Connecting
part of the
dots.
fun is showing more and more layers of that. All the characters I write, whether it's Kado or Araman, I really actually do start fundamentally the same way, which is to ask questions about what they want. What is the lie that they're telling themselves is one I always start with, because that's, I think, what makes Warhammer characters really, really compelling, is that most of them, at the heart of them, they have an element of self-deception, a flaw that will see them either disappointed in the world or undone by the world. Seeing Kado become miniature was just amazing. I've painted him 3 times myself already. It's
Wow, another
it's
one.
just great.
That's good, man.
The Dead Kingdom revealed by John French there. This is
I think it's really nice that Games Workshop has apparently stepped up so much
Eddie, what do we know
of
about
converting
this?
book characters
So the
into
Dead
miniatures.
Kingdom
That's
is
amazing,
the
man.
story of Kado into
Wow.
the realm of death.
Like, just
And
here
there's
we've
quite
seen
some
like
stuff
3
in there
characters,
that
right?
ties into
Oh,
the
wow.
bigger narrative of Warhammer
That's
Age.
amazing.
So, it kind
There
of
was a
dives
time when there
more
were only
into
like
the
3
politics of the
characters.
Soulblight Gravelords and the kind of rivalries you've got there.
And they got novels
Kado
told
finds
about them
himself
rather than,
still on his quest to track down
having it be the
Chaos
other way
Hunt,
around. So it's like,
that slew his
wow.
family all those years before. In Lethis, which is in the realm of death, which is also a place that we've gone to and we've seen in some of the main narrative of Warhammer Age of Sigmar through the campaigns. But he's also been called to a quest by his queen, Neferata, the Blood Queen, one of the original vampires of Warhammer, and she is currently embattled against
Neferata is my queen.
Karstein, who's one of the other main kind of original vampires, one of the other Mortocks. So there's this kind of almost a civil war in the realm of death. Between these rival vampire factions, always kind of jockeying for position under the kind of grand overview of Nagash, the Lord Necromancer. And he's quite happy for the Soulblights to kind of fight amongst themselves and for the naturally superior one to triumph. So Kado has to kind of balance his desire for vengeance and also to protect the mortals within the mortal realms against his duty to the Blood Queen herself. And so definitely someone you don't want to get on the wrong side of.
Nice, and also as well another character that sort of is a miniature as well.
Yeah, so I mean, all
classic
3 of those
character.
big characters in this book I've got miniatures. So Kado came out a couple of years ago in plastic. Manfred and Neferata are the kind of big, impressive centerpiece Mortarch characters. So if you're a fan of the Soulblight Gravelords and particularly their kind of lore that stretches their way all the way back to the origins of Warhammer in the world that was, this is a really good novel that kind of continues that story.
Great. Well, the pile is gone.
The pile is gone.
I think that is all we've got
Was
time
that
for,
it?
folks. Just wanted to say a big thank you for joining us today. Big thank you to Eddie.
Pleasure to be
Big
here.
thank you to Raf, our producer, and Andrew as well, making it all happen. We will see you on the next one.
Okay, so overall thoughts, I think that was a good spread. Although I would have liked to see more, and more information about where the main narrative of 40K is going, something more about the future of the Horus Heresy, something about the main narrative of Age of Sigmar, that might have been covered at some point during the event itself in Nottingham, but it's it's a bit funny. I would have liked to see a lot more, especially since I know that there's like 10 authors there today, because they all did a group photo yesterday or early this morning. Early this morning, yesterday. I think yesterday, yeah. They did a group photo and they posted it on social media. Something from Victoria Hayward, something from Jonathan, the other authors. I would have liked to see a lot more. But I think there was still a good spread across different themes and characters and the settings. But yeah. So, anyways, guys, that's it for me as well. Sorry for all the coughing. I've had it for like an entire week now. It's choosing to go away. Heavily medicated, by the way. So, anyways, that's it for me. We'll be back soon with another stream. Maybe tomorrow. Definitely Monday. We'll see. Cheers, guys. See you. Bye bye.